Okay, so you can see what we're going to talk about today. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining. My name is Mark, and I'm a networking professional. I spent most of my working life in networking technology. And when the invite came to present and do a webinar for 2 hours on Chat GPT in the networking world, I thought, well, this will be interesting. I'd had some experience with Chat GPT, but I thought this would be a great opportunity to actually put Chat GPT through its paces in the context of a networking professional. So if that's you, and if you spend your life in data networks, mostly from a technological point of view, I think you'll find this session very useful. I think it was certainly useful for me in putting it together. So, as I say, as Holly's already outlined, we will have a break in the middle for tea and coffee, around about the 55-minute mark. Please do feel free to ask questions. I think we can take 1 or 2 questions as we go through. There's quite a packed agenda. If there are a lot more than that, just to keep the continuity of the presentation going, I think we'll handle those questions towards the end of each session. So what we're going to talk about here today in terms of objectives, we are going to start with, I'm sure a number of you have used Chat GPT, probably you've all heard about it, but we're going to just take a quick look, a very quick look at, what Chat GPT is, and then take a sort of general look at how it can be used and how you can interact with it, just as a sort of an introductory section. And then the bigger part of our presentation here today is to look at how ChatGPT can or maybe can't be used in the context of the sort of things that we do and we work in our roles as networking professionals. As I say, what I've tried to do is use my experience with some fairly simple examples that we can look through in the time that we have here today, to show you what certainly I've come across in my challenges to GPT. So this is all really about let's put Chat GPT through its paces and see how it can help us or otherwise in our networking professional world. And obviously how to get the best out of Chat GPT in that environment. And I've tried to summarize that at the end. So let's start with a look at Chat GPT, so we have a sort of quick overall understanding of what it is. So Chat GPT is an AI. It's what we call a large language model AI. And what that really means is it has consumed or it's been trained on a large amount of information. That's general purpose information, not just networking, which is the focus of what we're going to look at today, but a large amount of information. And so we can use it and we can ask it questions on a number of different subjects. The interaction that we have with Chat GPT is all text-based. Okay, so there are different versions, as you can see over here, that I've tried to highlight. The one that I'm going to show you today is the generally available version 3.5. So what we see as Chat GPT is this thing, which is basically a chatbot. So it's it's a front end. It's something you can connect to through a web page or an app on your phone, and you can interact with it. The key thing in terms of its behavior is that it acts and talks to you like a human. Then when I say talks to you, it responds to your text with text of its own. It's actually been trained on a huge amount of information, millions or trillions of words, and sort of billions of websites. So it has a lot of information in there, and you can ask it a lot of different things. It is not easy for AI to act in a human way, and part of that is down to its training. The human language, or each language that we have in the human world, is quite a complex structure, and ChatGPT can actually talk more than 50 different languages. So it has a very large language model. It's launched about a year ago in November 2022, and as well as the standard 3.5 version that we're going to see today, there is also a ChatGPT Plus, which is a subscription model based AI, and that does give you some additional features over and above the text-based input. So for example, it has an API, so you can use programs to communicate with it. And the version 4 is actually constantly updated, whereas the standard version was programmed in 2021, so some of its information is a little bit out of date, and it does actually tell you that when you go and talk to it. If you've not seen it before, this is what ChatGPT looks like. You can see the version 3.5 up here. You can put your text down here, and you can see I've got an account here. You simply open an account, and if you want to upgrade to the full fat mod version, then you can see ChatGPT 4 is over here. So, very quickly, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this large language model is down to, an enormous amount of input of information, which enables ChatGPT to, talk to you and respond to your questions, and pretty much on any subject that there is. So it's been trained on so much information, in fact, that it's estimated it has an IQ of 147, which is a little bit scary because it's probably smarter than most of us in that respect, in terms of what it knows, and certainly quicker than most of us. It was created by a company called OpenAI, which was started by the infamous Elon Musk and the CEO now, or the reinstated CEO, Sam Altman. And it's got a lot of sponsors like Microsoft. It's had a lot of investment. And it's been trained by a lot of infrastructure. This supercomputer infrastructure here has trained it on, a vast amount of information. Not only has it, basically, imported lots of information from, from the web, these billions of web pages and, books, code, Wikipedia, you name it. It's also had additional training from human feedback. So OpenAI hired people to do what we call alignment, so that when it responds with questions, it was basically corrected, with a yes, no, or we think we should change the answers here. And that actually created the human-like responses that we want to get when we talk to it, and it gives us this human-like interaction. How popular is it? Well, it outputs now more than every 2 weeks. It outputs more textual output from our questions than all of the printed document data that the human race has ever actually printed. Every 2 weeks, it outputs more than that. So it's extremely popular. And it's used by a vast number of people. However, it does come with a caveat, and that is that according to OpenAI themselves, it should not be relied on for anything extremely important, at least not yet anyway. And I think we're going to see some reflections of that in some of the examples that I'm going to show you this morning from my experience with it. You need to think about the way that Chat GPT works in terms of the way that a human brain works. It has been modeled to a great extent in terms of its understanding, should we say, inverted commas, according to the human brain. So if you consider the human brain as something which receives, a message from some sensor in your body, you smell something, you hear something, you feel something, you taste something like that, then a signal goes to neurons in your brain, and those neurons then send signals to other neurons in your brain. And depending on the strength of those signals and the where those initial brain receptors connect to, it gives you a sense of understanding about what you're smelling, what you're hearing, what you're feeling, etc. Now, because ChatGPT is a textual AI, the model that it is based on is also called a neural network, and it kind of works in a similar way. So what I've tried to do here is just illustrate very quickly. So imagine a word that you type in a question comes in to ChatGPT, and this is your word here. Then when ChatGPT was trained on all those trillions of words that are in its effectively file or database, it made connections between the words that you put in and other words that it has seen when it's learned, documents and code and websites and et cetera. So your words make it, when it analyzes your words that come in, it looks at the connections that it has to other words associated to your words. And those connections have different strength points, as you can see here. So there's a 1, which is a weak connection, and a 5, which is a strong connection. Now, it actually has billions of connection weights, as you can see here. So when it analyzes your words, it actually has many more than 5, but that's all I can draw. It has billions of connections. And so it's able to form associations from what it's learned from the words that you put in. Essentially, ChatGPT doesn't know anything, but it associates what you put in as an input, as a question, with what it has learned in its training. And then it gives you an output. And that output, because of the way it uses these strengths here, is statistically likely to be something which sounds and feels like a good and true response. And that's basically the result of the training. And that's how, when you interact with it, you get something which sounds good and reasonable and helpful when it responds to you. That's all I'm really going to say about it at this point. But, it's not an intelligent being. It's not a sentient being. It is basically a mathematical model that statistically analyzes what you put in and finds the most probable and best answer based on its training. Now, it is extremely popular, like I say, and sometimes, as happened to me recently, when you go to its website, it says that it's not available. So, and it is so popular that there are now something like 180 million users of this application, and it is the most popular application in the computer world of all time. So, having gone through that introduction, how can we use ChatGPT? And as I say, I'm going to start off just by generally looking at some simple examples. And I try to put some on a slide here to cover a number of different areas. You can ask it to translate languages. It speaks 50 languages for you. And when it translates languages, it's probably going to be better than something like Google Translate because it has this, contextual association database to make it more accurate. It can teach you. It can give you information about a given subject, like you want to become an electrician from what it's read. You can give it a document and you can say, can you improve this for me? You can ask it to compare things. You can ask it to tutor you for an upcoming interview. You can get it to summarize something in a number of words. Now, there are some caveats. I think 2048 characters is what you can currently put in as a maximum input. But, in theory, it's able to summarize a very large document, and you can ask it how to summarize in a few words. So that can be very, very useful when you just want to, get a brief overview of something that might be more difficult to read. You can ask it to give you suggestions, like a list of things to do if you're going, on a holiday, for example. You can actually ask it to give you some code. If you're not familiar with a coding language, it can help you to get started, and it can produce some code for you because it's read and understood code. And you can do some brainstorming, for example, how do I start a business, that sort of thing. So a wide number of subjects. I've tried to put a few here just as a sort of helpful, introductory set of examples, not related to networking. I'm learning Chinese. I'm learning Chinese Mandarin at the moment, and I've asked it to say, well, please translate this sentence here into Mandarin. And I put what I wanted it to translate for me into quotes, and it simply understood that, and it's outputted these Chinese characters here. In Chinese, you also have something called pinyin, which is like helps us in the Western world to pronounce. So, or shang ju zhongguo doijia is what it's et cetera. And so, it's helped me to translate this sentence for me. Then I can analyze it, and it helps me to learn. And then you can send it follow-up questions within the same chat. This case, I said, please translate the same into Italian. And it's known exactly what I've said. It's known that same here relates to this passage here in quotes. And so it gives me that in Italian. Okay, so simple things in a general way can help me with my learning here. I said it can help you compare things. I've asked it to compare Swedish and Thai massage in 50 words or less. Some of you might like to massage, and I've asked it, how do you compare Swedish and Thai massage? So it's said that Thai massage and Swedish massage differ in origins. Swedish is more flowing strokes and kneading, while Thai is more stretching and pressure points. And then it's asked if that was helpful. So you can see there's a number of different things that it can do here. I can ask it to write me a poem about a sunset in 100 words, and it gives me a nice poem about a sunset. So very, very diverse is what it is, because it's been trained on a large number of things. As a quick demo here, I asked ChatGPT, please write a program that adds two numbers together in Python 1.1. I've done a little bit of Python. I could probably write this myself, but it's generated this code for me. And if I just go over to my desktop here, I put that code into Notepad. This is the bit that it gave me here. It will exit out of that program immediately afterwards. So I've just given it another line here to stay in that program. And if you bear with me. I will show you this program, which is this one here. It's called Multiply. Let's move this over here. Excuse me, and double click that. And it opens up this window here. And there we can see from my, let's just minimize that here. There you can see enter the first number. That's what it asked me here. I can put in 23. I can put in 67 as my second number. And it multiplies those and tells me that the sum is my 90 there. And then this was my line here that I put in just so that you didn't see it disappear off the screen. And I type quit, and then it goes goodbye. So, you know, it can help me with a large number of things, in not just sort of words, but also code. And that's, you know, very useful for us in the technological world. OpenAI doesn't only have ChatGPT, it also has an AI called DALL-E 2. And the difference really here is that DALL-E 2 is creative and artistic, and you can ask it to design some art for you, and it will actually design, you know, some beautiful artwork and things of that sort. You can't ask ChatGPT anything that is not a textual question, and it can't output to you anything that's not textually, you know, rendered, something that that can't be written in text. So, but just to say that, you know, the OpenAI folks have more than just ChatGPT as an AI, and there are, of course, many other AI systems as well. Some general ones like, you know, Bing, for example, and, you know, Google Mind and things of that sort. You know, there are also Azure AI services, and Amazon has its services as well. And then there are some other AI systems that are more focused on specific tasks. And another one that I use, for example, is this one from Anthropic, which is called Claude. So you can go and have a look at other AIs as well, but ChatGPT is the one that we're going to look at today. And ChatGPT is probably the one that most people are generally aware of and have heard. So that's a sort of an overall general introduction to ChatGPT. As I say, for the most part of this webinar today, I'm really trying to focus in on where and how, if possible, ChatGPT can be used in you know, as a helpful tool in the world of a networking professional. So what I've got here is a number of different examples where I put ChatGPT through its paces, and you know, a broad brush of examples, which hopefully will reflect at least some of its capabilities. And I would encourage you to, you know, use this information if you haven't used it already, to you know, to investigate further. And I've tried to use a number of examples here to give a you know, a sort of realistic appraisal, if you like. I think that's the way we can look at this next section, as a realistic appraisal of the capabilities that ChatGPT has for you know, has for the world of networking. So I actually asked ChatGPT this question: how can it be used to help me or a networking professional? I may be able to, yeah. So I actually asked this question yesterday, and with ChatGPT, there's a sort of a randomness factor. So one of the reasons that it doesn't appear to be too robotic is if you put the same question in more than once. So the question I asked it yesterday was, how can ChatGPT assist a network engineer or professional person in the world of data networks? It came out with most of the same answers as I put here in my slide, but there are some differences. And that is down to is the way that it has been programmed with a sort of a randomness factor so that it doesn't appear to be too robotic, and it does have a more sort of human feeling interface. So these are the sort of overall categories, if you like, and we're going to look at a large number of these. Troubleshooting assistance, I mean, that would be a great help. We're always looking to try and we've always got issues with our infrastructure, and we need sort of any help with helping us to troubleshoot would be great. We're always learning new technologies, so concept clarification, individual concepts, or larger problems like learning new technologies down to a sort of deep level. Network design and network design optimization is another area where it could potentially help. We certainly have our own experience in terms of design, but if we can have input from something else to assist us in that endeavor, then that can only expand our thoughts and give us new ideas and help to improve us, especially if the AI is kept up to date. Remember, the version we're using here is 3.5, so it's only up to date to September 2021, but by all means you can subscribe to the version 4. We've seen a little bit of scripting, so how about scripting and automation for networks as well? Documentation assistance, we've seen it can write poems, but it can certainly help with structuring and giving us more structured documents, such as we would have in the world of operation and maintenance and management of networks. Study and certification preparation, so going further than just learning new technologies, but actually looking to get certified. So can it give us exam type questions? Can it help us to set up lab environments where we're trying to build an environment that would help us to do some hands-on for certification? Brainstorming ideas, research, quick references, all these things. It can go and hopefully look up things quickly for us and be a central tool where we can use it to go, for example, and look up information from different vendors, but from one place, rather than having to go through different vendor websites and reading vendor documentation. We're kind of cheating and potentially asking ChatGPT to do that for us, and it can save us time. And generally speaking, all these things are about saving time in our professional roles, which is got to be a good thing. And so just looking at something like troubleshooting, for example, just to open up the idea of troubleshooting. Troubleshooting in general, time is of the essence. If we're operating a live environment, then being able to quickly get access to information that's going to help us to solve the problem, be it we give it an error code, and we recommend and maybe get some recommended actions, such as some show commands to help us investigate the issue. Maybe being able to integrate the AI through a test tool of some sort, so through its API integration. Of course, that's going to require version 4 again, but so for example, Cisco PY ATS is a test tool. Cisco uses this test tool to, I just write it up here. So it's a Python-based tool. It's called PY ATS, and it's a diagnostic tool that's used within Cisco for in its support. For example, big networking vendor. Other vendors have their own tools as well, but through an API that can interlink with something like GPT if you're using version 4, and that can potentially give very quick information from various sources. It can go and retrieve information and feedback to the testing tool and make suggestions on what to use for further investigations into the issue. It can help to generate emails and text to keep people informed of the status of an issue, for example. You can now ask Chat GPT to analyze configurations, to analyze faults and compare to a log file, something that a human would take a long time to read if it's a very large log of issues. A machine can do that very much more quickly for us, and generally give us answers of good quality based on experience. All these things can be beneficial to us in our troubleshooting. So given these potential areas of where ChatGPT can help, I decided to give it some challenges of my own. So I set up an environment, a pretty simple environment, I think. If those of you who are networking engineers, you'll be able to hopefully follow along with what I've got in here. So the troubleshooting scenario is this: that I have a very simple networking environment here. I'm going to show you my demo environment in just a second, but it reflects this. We're using dual stack. So there is IP version 6 running, there's IP version 4 running, and we are separating two networks here, the 10.1.1 network over here, or the 10 network over here, and the 192.168.1 network over here. And we've currently got a problem. These routers have got a problem. I've deliberately created this problem, which I thought was a pretty simple issue to solve, and I gave ChatGPT the challenge of solving it to see how good it was at basically analyzing the configurations that I gave it. I'll show you the configurations here very quickly. So I've given it a configuration of one router, and I've given it a configuration of the other router. So those are the two routers that you can see here in the diagram. If I go over to my working environment, I'll show you my setup here. This is the left-hand router. I've called it R1. This is the right-hand router. I've called it R2. We're having some problems at the moment. For example, if I try to ping, this device on the right-hand side, you can see here is the IP address, the IP version 6 IP address of this device on the right, and I'm trying to ping it from this device over here on the left. There's the address. I put in the ping, and I get this response from the router saying that there's no route to the destination. And if I go into my router here, I can do a show IP route, and I can see, sorry, I should do a show IP version 6 route, because we're talking about IP version 6 here. I can see in here, the network I want to get to is this one up here, 2001 DB83. That's where this target device is. You can see that's the network that it's on here. And I don't have that network in my routing table in this router on the left-hand side. I can go over here, show IP version 6 route to the router on the right-hand side, and it has a route to the 2001 DB81 network, which is the network that VPCA is on here. If I go up to here, I can show you its IP address. There it is. There's the IP address of the device on the left. But we've got a problem with the routing table of this device on the right. So when I basically send my ping off here, it's getting lost in this router. Now, I deliberately created this issue, and I will show you what the issue is. The issue is that on the right-hand router over here, this interface is not configured with the IP RIP protocol. Okay, it's not running RIP generation, next generation, which is the protocol to advertise that IP version 6 route. And because it's not doing that, that network, the network on the this network here, the 3 network, is not getting advertised to the router on the right. So a very straightforward issue. And I'm going to show you what Chat GPT came back with as an answer here in terms of the question that I asked it. So I said, please take a look at the following 2 router configurations. There's the router 1, and there's the router 2. Now notice one thing. I did, after the question mark, leave R1 on this line and didn't put it down to the next line. And that's what might have confused it. But what it said was, when it came back with an answer, it says that, in fact, I'm looking at the wrong one, I think, here. This one, I think, is the one that I gave it. This is the first time I gave it the question. Excuse me, this is the first time I gave it the question. It came up with the answer and says, it appears that the issue lies with the RIP protocol, but it appears that the issue is on router 1, specifically with this interface GI00, where it says that the configuration of RIP is not on that interface. In router 1, the GI00 interface has the IP address assigned, but not the RIP command. So what it is telling me basically is that this command here is not on this interface of this router. Now, you might think that's a simple mistake to make, but what it shows is that ChatGPT has got a little bit confused about the input that I've given it and the question that I've given it, and it's interpreted the configurations in an incorrect way, and it's come to the wrong assumption. So if I go back to, my overall sort of grading or assessment of this situation, what I've said is that, well, ChatGPT did offer a solution, and it did find the issue, but it associated it with the wrong router, and it associated it with the wrong interface on that router. So I think, what it really means is that you can't believe everything that ChatGPT says all the time, and that, you should certainly analyze what it says, see if it's helpful, but don't take it word for word. Okay, so it made the wrong observation in this case, and it was a relatively simple issue. I think if it was, in quotes, intelligent, it should have been able to find the answer and be accurate about the answer and be accurate about the interface that was incorrectly configured by me. I think we've got just about enough time before the break to go through a second scenario. And I can do that on the same demonstration environment. So the second scenario was this. I was having problems connecting via SSH to my router. And I gave ChatGPT this configuration here. Again, there's a deliberate mistake, something missing in the configuration. One kind of, I'm just trying to test really if ChatGPT is able to, again, using a different example, fully understand what the configuration of a router looks like and whether it can, correct any mistakes, whether it's smart enough to really be able to, build configurations for me and build configurations for me, more importantly, without errors. So, we can't just use one example, it's best to use another one. So that was what this second scenario is about. If I go over to my test environment again, over here, which is this one, I'm logged in here via the console. I'm not logged in via SSH. So if I try to connect to the router via SSH, we'll see what happens here. This is the interface I'm going to connect on, 10.99.99.120, which is this gigabit Ethernet 2 interface here. So I say 10.99.99.120. Try and connect here, log in as admin. I'm just going to change the resolution so you can see a little bit better here. There we go, that comes up a little bit clearer. And I know the password. Maybe I typed the password incorrectly. But no, I didn't. I didn't type the password incorrectly. This is the issue that I'm getting with SSH. And I've omitted a line from the configuration. If I show you the configuration here that I have, bear with me a second. Excuse me, sorry about that. So this is the configuration that I've given it. There is a deliberate error in there, but it's not a huge configuration. And the configuration is to do with these virtual communication lines down here. I've got pretty much everything, but there's one line missing. When I've asked ChatGPT about this issue, let me just go over to my web page here and show you the ChatGPT actual response. This one here. So here's my question. I have an issue connecting via Telnet and SSH to the router. Here's my configuration. Can you take a quick look at that? And what ChatGPT has said is that I've noticed a few typo issues in your configuration. So here's an updated version. And all it's really done is it said, instead of writing this abbreviation, you should write the full text of that interface configuration here. Instead of writing no shut, you should write no shutdown. And basically it has, and then it removed another one, which is an exit command. All these responses are not to do with the issue. They're just semantics in terms of text. And so it really didn't see the issue that was there. And the issue that was there was a simple line of text here. So my SSH didn't work. The issue that was there, which I kind of knew as an experienced networking engineer, and I'm putting Chat GPT to the test to see if it is also, able to help me, as an assistant to an experienced engineer, was this line of text that I'm going to put in now. So, and what I'm doing is I'm referring to these virtual lines, and I am going to give it this command, which is login local, which means the router itself is able to, when you give it credentials, use those credentials to do the login. This was the line that was missing. And so that's why I couldn't SSH. If I try to SSH now into the device with those commands there, or with that command now added, there's the same password as before. I'll just make that clearer for you so that you can see it. There we go. I've now managed to log in. I can get into the switch and I can do all the rest of it. So a very simple configuration. I would say a very simple configuration. ChatGPT really should have found this issue, but it did miss it, and I had to find the issue myself, or I had to be knowledgeable about that issue myself. So we're coming out to the break, but overall, I would say from these two demonstrations anyway, it is certainly true that ChatGPT does have quite some way to go to be smart enough to be able to read even the most sort of fundamental configurations here. And in a troubleshooting situation where time is of the essence, and that you're trying to get your network infrastructure up, you're trying to get your users working again, there may be some misconfigurations, then I don't think we can certainly say at this point in time that ChatGPT can be relied on for helping us. Certainly not every time. I'll show you some other examples after the break that we have that might be a little bit more encouraging, but it's certainly not a full picture, and we should take it in that context. So I don't know if there's any sort of questions at all, but before we've got a couple of minutes before the break time, if anyone had any questions, and we'll start the presentation again and look at other examples after the break.
Right, so welcome back, everyone. So we have two questions for you, Mark. So Lewis asked, is there any way we could have phrased the two questions and got the right answer, or is this not nuanced yet?
So thanks very much for that question, Lewis. Let me just share my screen again. So there is, to some great extent, a sort of a randomness factor here, as well as to answer your question. So quite possibly, by asking the question in a different sort of way, it's quite possible that you will get a different answer. I've done that several times myself. And I just wanted to show you the example of the question about the RIP configuration issue, for example. So I asked this down here. This was the first one. This was the one where I got the wrong answer that I showed you. There's also asked the same question in exactly the same way with the same kind of typo that I did before that I showed you. And this time it actually did come back with the right answer, which was on R2. This configuration is missing. Well, actually not quite the right answer because it got the wrong interface, but it did get the right router this time. So now I don't know if that's due to the randomness factor or exactly what, but all I'm really saying is that we need to be careful. We certainly can get different answers if we ask the same question again in an identically different way, and we will get slightly different answers if we ask the question in a different way as well. But, you know, in a hurry, we can't really depend upon it at the moment. And that's the sort of best answer I think I can give you right now. Hopefully. So do keep trying and do keep testing it out for a given scenario. You know, hopefully you can get at least some assistance here, and you may land on the right answer, but it's not, you know, it's not fail safe, I think it's safe to say at the moment.
Lovely, thank you. So second question. So when we troubleshoot for real network scenarios, are we not disclosing some of our information to the open world? For example, if I need to troubleshoot for a routing issue specifically for a customer routing.
Very good question from Masood. Thank you, Masood. Yes, I mean, they're both very good questions, a different context, this one, but yes, it's absolutely right that OpenAI does keep your questions, your text, and the responses. And so it is important, if you are sending any information, that you don't disclose anything which is of a sensitive nature. So you know, remove passwords, you remove really anything, names and descriptions that might be something which you know, could potentially allow information to be stored somewhere that you, on behalf of your customers, that you don't that you shouldn't be allowing that to happen on. So yeah, absolutely. So maybe you can mask your questions, or maybe you can change the configuration to you know, eliminate those sensitive pieces.
Lovely.
Great. Well, thank you. No, thank you very much for those questions, folks. So we're in the second half of our presentation here. Let's get back to what we were showing you before, and I'm going to move on here to the next part. So you know, one of the things which, you know, in the world of technology we're always trying to do is we're always trying to learn more things and digest more information. I would say, you know, Chat GPT is certainly a very human-friendly, or, you know, pseudo-human-friendly, appears a human-friendly interface, and it can certainly help us with you know, by consolidating information that it finds on a given subject through, you know, a single interface. And, you know, as I've intimated before, you can get responses that are limited to a certain number of words. You can even ask it to, you know, talk to you in very simple language or more technical language, things of that sort. So you can use, and it can understand your requests to feed you information to help you in that, you know, learning process. Of course, you will need ChatGPT 4 if you're going to ask for anything up to date, because, as I mentioned before, the information is at least 2 years old now in the 3.5 version. But, you know, I've certainly, for concept clarification, I've certainly used Chat GPT, you know, and I recently, and for, you know, a number of months now. So, you know, here's an example here where I've asked it to, you know, condense or give me an output about to explain RFC 6724. Now, RFC 6724 is, you know, a fairly long RFC. Most RFCs are, not all of them are very long, but they certainly take some reading. And so please explain RFC 6724 is my only question here. And then I get in a few lines, you know, a nice condensed response, and it tells me, you know, what it's about. It breaks it down into nice sections here for particular considerations: APIs, default addresses, type preferences, label and prioritization, selection rules. If you're not aware, this RFC is basically all about how in an IP version 6 world where devices have multiple addresses, you know, there are link local, there are unique local, there are global addresses, and a given device can have multiple addresses assigned to its interface. What addresses does it use when it sends packets to, you know, target devices that it wants to talk to? And my second question was, do Windows devices and Linux devices, you know, implement the recommendations of which interface, which IP address to use when they're sending packets out from their range of addresses on Windows and Linux platforms? And then it gives me an explanation of that. And it's, you know, very nice and condensed and directly to the point, and very, very helpful to help me to further my knowledge and get information very, very quickly. And then, you know, there's another quick example down here I'll show you, which was, you can see I use ChatGPT quite a lot for a number of different things. This second example is, you know, please can you explain the urgent pointer, or how the urgent pointer is used in TCP? And it gives me, again, a nicely constructed output with different sections, different bullet points per section, and then a sort of a summary conclusion at the end of that. And I can, you know, again, go further and deeper with questions on the same subject, and it can certainly help me to learn. I mean, and this is an important part of what we do in our world, in technology and in networking. There's all these different areas here. There are, you know, thousands more. It's certainly a very good reference point for us there. So, you know, I think in terms of documentation, in terms of knowledge, in terms of getting concise and precise information quickly, I think ChatGPT is a very, very good tool indeed. Another example that I gave it, which is related to configuration, is in the world of design. So I gave ChatGPT the challenge of, I've got a configuration here. I'm doing some IPsec. I've got an IPsec environment. I've got a configuration. Can you help me to improve that configuration? This is my setup here. Again, it looks very similar to no, in fact, that's the wrong one. Excuse me. It looks very similar because it's exactly the same one. This is the one that I wanted to show you. So I'm using IPsec here. I'm using a very simple setup again between two routers. IPsec is working. I can show you my configuration. And what I have effectively done is ask ChatGPT to make any recommendations on the configuration, just to prove that IPsec is working here. If I just go over here, I can run up Wireshark on this router interface, send a ping, and we'll see that it's encrypted using IPsec encryption. So if I just filter this with IP, maybe make this a little bit bigger so we can see stuff. Again, these routers are running RIP. You can see RIP packets here. These are not encrypted because what I'm doing is I'm going to send a ping from here to here. IPsec is running in here. I've got a security profile that says anything that's coming off of this network here and going over to this side, I want to encrypt in IPsec. But router-to-router conversations like RIP that we just saw, that's going to be in the clear. So if I go over to VPCA here, you can see I've run this ping before. If I run the ping again, I'm pinging this device over here on the right. The first ping doesn't work because it's doing some ARP resolution, and then the pings get through, they go to the other end. And here I can see in my breakout that the security negotiation has taken place for my IPsec tunnel, as it were, and then the packets of the ping have gone through and they've been encrypted down there, which is what you see here with these ESP headers. And I'm seeing the pings going out and I'm seeing the pings coming back. So I've got 8 packets in all, and they've all been encrypted. I can't read them down here because of the encryption that's working. But the challenge that so that's the setup, but the challenge that I set to Chat GPT, and this is my configuration here, I say, can you improve it? So I'll highlight some of the aspects of the configuration here. I'm using MD5 hash, which is an old and not particularly fail-safe hashing mechanism these days. I'm using triple DES as an encryption, and that's fairly old. And I'm using a very small password here. I just called it my password. And I asked ChatGPT, can you make me some recommendations based on that? And it's been very good. It's come back and it says, well, we recommend you use SHA-256, which is a better hashing algorithm, that you use AES-256 for encryption, and that your password is not good enough and really should be longer. I can show you the actual chat here, which is, if you just bear with me for a second here, IPsec design. Okay, let's go over to Chat GPT here. And there we go. This is the actual chat. I did it recently. As you can see here, there's my input with my MD5 and my triple DES, and the response that it came back with was this. So first of all, use a stronger hashing algorithm, and it's recommended the 256 SHA. Use a stronger encryption algorithm, and it's recommended a transform set that uses AES here. Okay, and it's recommended that my my key be longer, use a longer password or a more complex pre-shared key, which is the pre-shared key is this password here, and it's given me an example of a longer one. It's also made some other recommendations here. So it says enable perfect forward secrecy, and perfect forward secrecy means that you know, when you change the keys, then they're not, you know, backward engineered, so that older if someone manages during a particular use of a particular key to decrypt the data, then data that was sent with an older key, or when the key is changed to a newer key, then the decryption can't work. They can only, you know, see the data if they have managed to crack it while we were using that particular key. And then it makes some other recommendations about For example, maybe you want to narrow down what it is you're actually encrypting, not just maybe everything from this network, but maybe, individual devices and some other recommendations in there. So from a sort of design point of view, an optimization point of view, ChatGPT can offer contextual preferences. In this case, it understood without any prompting, just gave it the configuration. It understood the configuration, and it made some very good recommendations based on, what it's been programmed with, or what it's been fed with and trained on in terms of optimizations. And it could make that connection and feed that back to me. So I found that very, very useful. Then another challenge that I gave it, so I said, really, this is, all about sort of worked examples. I gave it a very simple challenge of using IP version 4, let's create a subnetting strategy. I want 300 subnets with 48 devices. And that was my, as you can see here, design an IP version 4 subnetting strategy, 300 subnets and 48 devices. And it certainly started to go through this design challenge. It's something we have to do a lot in networking, design subnets. We usually use a tool or something like that. I thought I would see how Chat GPT comes out on this. So here's my question. You can see it up here. And first of all, it starts to come out with some pretty useful information, which is that, okay, if you want 48 devices, we need to find a power of 2 that is equal or greater than 48. In this case, 2 to the power 6 gives us 64. It's a little bit more, but that's what we need. So we'll have, in your address, there'll be 6 bits of the address that are used for hosts. And then it says, okay, you want 300 subnets. So we need to find the smallest power of 2 that is equal to or greater than 300. So we have our 300 subnets, and that's 512. So I thought, well, this is looking very promising. If I go back to my, my page here, and just use my pen for a second. This is what it's basically said. So, oops. Let me just go back and erase that. That's a bit messy. Okay. So if I have an address here, then I want to have 6 host bits here. That gives me 2 to the power 6, which equals 64. I know we can't use the first and the last, so that's really 62 hosts. And then we want some subnet bits, which must be at least down here. 2 to the power 9 gives us 512. That's more than 300, but that's good. So I can go up here and I say, okay, so 9 bits here, and that will give me 512 subnets, which is absolutely fine. And if I look at the size of that address, that means I've got, basically these 3 sections: my base network, my subnet bits, and then my host bits that are over here. Okay, so basically any address that is has got this many bits for the network here will work. And if I get a base address, then 9 of those bits are reserved for the subnet. And I thought, that's all very good. That's exactly what I wanted. And it's looking very positive. So, but then things started to go a little bit wrong, unfortunately. So if we move a little bit down here, it says it kind of follows my logic of 6 and 9 bits here makes 17. So that's, the mask is basically of my original address can be anything which is /17. If I go back to my slide, that's this point here, which is where I drew my my line. So I've got 17 bits here, and so any address that I'm given here with a /17, that works fine, because I've then got 9 bits for my subnet and 6 bits for my hosts, and that's absolutely fine. So that's all looking good as well. But then, unfortunately, it started to get very confused. And so what it says was, okay, the design of the subnet plan looks like this. Your first subnet will be 192, for example, 168, if we use 192.168 addressing with a /17, and you've got addresses, you've got your 64 devices on these numbers here, which isn't quite right, but it's not bad, it's pretty close. But then it says the final address number will be 192, or subnet 300 will have this address, which is 192.168.0.46,080, and the devices will be addressed 192.168.0.46.081 to 192.168.46144. Now, if anyone knows anything about addressing, this number here is completely wrong. The numbers in the dot decimal notation can't be any more than 255. So it's not really understood the context and the rules around subnetting. And so, you know, obviously, there is a big caveat here, and I've, you know, sort of concluded my thoughts on the slide here that, you know, ChatGPT does not understand IP subnetting and dotted decimal boundaries. I think we need to be very careful there. If you know, again, according to the questions earlier, if I'd asked the same question again, maybe it would come out with a different answer. But there's clearly some misinterpretation of my question here. Okay, scripting and automation then. How does it stand up with scripting and automation? So my question to ChatGPT in this context was, how do I use Python to speak to networking devices? Now, two of the main libraries that we use in Python to talk to networking devices is something called Paramiko. And Paramiko is responsible for authentication, logging in, you know, verifying passwords, verifying keys and that sort of stuff. And then once you've connected and authorized to a device, then this other library called NetMiko is, you know, very good, and a very good library for communicating with the device and, you know, making configuration commands, or, you know, pulling output from devices, that sort of stuff. So my question to ChatGPT was exactly this: how do I access and configure a Cisco router using Python? And ChatGPT immediately came back and says, oh, you should use Paramiko, and you should use the NetMiko libraries with Python. So go and install them, which of course is great. And I already had them installed, but, you know, I could go and install those. And then when you're writing your Python scripts, import those libraries using these commands. And then we can, you can perform some additional tasks here. If we go again and have a look at the actual Chat GPT that was here, just bear with me 1 second here. Configure Cisco router with Python, this one here. So here's my, see, there's quite a lot of stuff in here. Here's my original question. Here are those first two very helpful outputs. You want to install these. And when you write a script, you want to use these by importing them into your script. And then it very helpfully gave me an outline of the structure of my Python script for the Paramico part, which is the authentication. So you have to put in the router's IP address, you have to put in the username and password, and then it'll use those in these functions here, which are part of the Paramico library that helps Python. And then you have the actual login function itself that you can see here called SSH client. SSH client connect, and you put, and that takes the values from this dictionary here of login credentials. And then the second part, it gave me very helpful. This is for the NetMiko part, as you can see here. It says when you want to do something, here's an example. For example, you use enable to get the privilege exec prompt. You say config terminal, and then maybe you want to configure an IP address. So I thought, okay, I will set this up and I will go and do this. So let's go over to this setup here, very similar to what we've seen before. I'm going to try and log into and configure this router here. If you quickly have a look with me to see what this router is doing, it shows you that I currently don't have this interface configured, but I can connect to it via PuTTY. The address slightly different from what we've seen before. It's 1099.99.200. So let's go to SSH to it as Paramico would do. Make sure that we can connect. Otherwise, Paramito is never going to be able to connect, of course. And there we go. We've logged into the router via PuTTY. So the router is configured with SSH. So let's go and so first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you on this machine. I've got a couple. Well, this is my first program or my first Python script that I created. I put in the parameters for the router here, and I've taken basically everything that Chat GPT gave me. And I've also used the example of configuring an IP address, and I want to configure it on that interface that doesn't currently have an IP address on it. So let's see what happens when we actually do this. So I'm going to go over to the command prompt here, and I'm going to say Python demo1.py and see what happens. And I get an issue, okay? I get an issue. And that's what I said in my slide here, that I had some issues. So I gave these issues to Chat GPT, and it says, it looks like there's a small issue with your script. You have a missing comma after Cisco in the commands, which might lead to a syntax error. What it's actually referring to here is I go back to this script here. It's actually referring to this thing down here. So in addition to what it told me before, because I'm using an enable secret on my router here, after I say enable, I have to give it the password. And it's saying there should be a comma there. And it's absolutely right. It should be a comma there. And it's picked that out as the issue. But I went back to ChatGPT and basically said, no, that's not the issue. And I gave it this line that we saw when we run that demo script just now. This one that says, there's been an authentication failure here, an authentication exception, and that's caused Paramiko to basically shut down. Okay, so the Paramiko connection has been dropped as a result of that. I gave that information back to Chat GPT, and it says, okay, how about we run debugging? So it was very helpful, and it said, and it suggested that we run debugging in the Chat GPT. And that's what I did. It actually told me how I can run debugging as well. If I quickly go back to here and have a look in here, the line for is the line for debugging in this one here. I'm not sure it is. Perhaps I haven't got that to show you, but I ran debugging. And when I ran debugging, I go back to the presentation here, I got all this output here as a result of enabling debugging to get more information about what was happening within Paramiko. And this is the important part. It says there's an authentication issue here due to the public key that was being used. And it gave me some recommendations around adding a something to the program based around the key file for the keys that were being used. And because of that failure down here, where my cursor is here, it says that as a result of that, there's a protocol error. We had an expected packet type, we got something else, and therefore we saw that transport shut down in Paramiko, and we could go no further. But if you look at the output here, these lines here show that after these debugs, I'm actually getting output from the router. So Paramiko has got through to the router, and actually that's verifying the logging credentials. And this line of exception, or this information here saying that it's failed now due to a public key issue, means that after the login, Paramiko was then basically saying, well, I've still got a problem, although I've logged into this router, and I'm going to log you out. And then we don't go any further. And so what was wrong, as it turned out, was that, and this is because, you know, I knew a little bit about the way that this should work, is that it was looking for a key file entry in the configuration, and Chat GPT hadn't given that to me initially. So the way to get around this, as it turns out, was to, we've got an issue. I'm feeding it back to Chat GPT. I'm asking for help, and it's telling me that I need to add something that it didn't initially ask me to add. And I was, basically taking its word for it on the initial request that I gave it. Excuse me, I've just clicked the wrong thing here. So what needed to be added was this thing here. I need to tell it not to look for keys. I'm not using keys to log in. I'm using a username and a password. I'm not giving it any keys, and it was failing because I wasn't giving it keys. ChatGPT didn't ask me to use keys, but then it told me I was failing because I didn't have a key file entry in my script. So by adding this anyway, I don't need to add that key file entry capability. Now, that did actually solve, and it didn't disconnect anymore, but I still had an issue once I connected, and ChatGPT couldn't really solve the issue for me. I was going round and round and round and asking lots of questions. And finally, I thought, well, maybe it's something to do with that part of the script, which was this thing here, where I was asking it to go into enable mode and then add my Cisco password afterwards to be able to go into NetMiko conversation, shall we say. And it turned out that that was exactly what the issue was. And so intuitively, I went back to Chat GPT with, kind of my knowledge and my intuition, and said, well, basically, can Chat GPT provide an example of how to interact using Python, given the fact that I had an enable password? And this time it responded to me for that specific question with a response saying, yeah, you need to put in this line into your code, which it didn't do before. So when I asked it the specific question, it came back with a good answer. It also told me I had to put this line into my code. And, the result was that now my environment works. So that's where this second script comes into play with this line, and then inside of my initial Paramiko, my initial Paramiko section here, I added this additional line here, and I added this additional line down here, which is going to help me with my NetMiko setup. Anyway, the result is that if I run my second program now, which I've had a little bit of assistance from ChatGPT, well, not direct, didn't exactly solve my issue, first of all, and it gave me a little bit of an incorrect steer initially. I've now got to the point where my script runs properly. I have now a configured IP address on that interface and my authentication to the router, and I could obviously run some more configurations on that. Works. So I got success in the end. I would say ChatGPT was helpful with providing information about how to do some debugging. It certainly provided some useful information, but it did not solve the issue for me. I really needed, kind of my intuition and my experience as a network engineer to do a fair amount of the work in this case. And so, further to what we talked about before, it may depend on the way you ask questions, but you're going to get you're going to get some useful information out of ChatGPT for these different scenarios, but it won't necessarily be able to just take your question and give you an immediate response, though it may help and point you in some respects in the right direction. And that's my sort of overall conclusion here. Moving on, we got just a few minutes left, about 10 minutes left to talk here, and then maybe some questions at the end. I think I've said this before, but learning and documentation, I would say, is another very strong area where ChatGPT can help. It is very good at constructing a good outline for documents, and it can go and find information for you in terms of your learning, but also in terms of you're documenting your environment. You can tell it the sort of things that are in your design, and it can give you helpful suggestions. It can maybe even write text for you for putting into your documents that describe the way that your network runs. That's going to save you time. The structure is going to be pretty good, I would say, but it's not going to draw diagrams for you. At least, ChatGPT is a chatbot in its current state. So you'd need something else maybe, or you have to draw the diagrams yourself. It can do proofreading and editing. It can help you to know what to put into your diagrams. And it can, help with things like, I would say, templating, language translation for, different parts of the world for distributing your documents. And it can help you build certain sections, such as conclusions, FAQs, and things of that sort. And I think, all those are very, 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 very helpful. So it may not be foolproof in understanding Cisco language, but we've seen some examples where it does understand, reasonably well. And so, I've used it a couple of times to do sort of, vendor translation. So if you are working in a multi-vendor environment, then, a suggestion might be, well, if you're, from the Juniper side of the house and you're looking to do things in the Cisco side of the house, very different management interfaces, then, it can help to translate one configuration type into another, and things of that sort. And I think, that certainly has benefits for us as networking engineers as well. Study and certification for, actual exams. I think it can help with these things here, from, an overall structured approach to your studying, resource recommendations, helping understanding concepts. We've already talked a little bit about that. Maybe some exam question practice, things of that nature. How to set up a practice lab, what's involved in setting up a practice lab, and various other things as well, examples, troubleshooting scenarios, things of these sort. I think all of these things, from its knowledge base, from its training, there's an awful lot of information that it has access to, and it can help you to structure your study towards your certification goals. It can also, just with a very short question about a certain subject. For example, here I said I want to build a home network to help me pass the CCNA routing and switching. I don't, but this was just a question that I wanted to ask it to do. I have an environment where I have this thing called EVNG. By the way, that's what we were looking at in our labs. And I'm using Hyper-V to host the EVNG. EVNG is this network simulator that we saw previously. And in fact, the labs were running up in Microsoft Word using Hyper-V as well. So I've asked it the question, what can you help me with here? And I'll show you the response. So it's this one here called CCNA Home Setup. And if I go to the top, there's my question again. I want to build a home network to help me to pass CCNA routing and switching exam. I want to use EVNG. I want to use Hyper-V. What do I need? And so then it gives me a list of equipment and operating systems, some settings for running in a virtualized environment, because it recognizes the fact that we're using Hyper-V here. It's given me some very, very high level tips on topology design, images that I'll need. So, it's like an initial start me up list. And I think it's very, very useful just to, have a list, really. We make lists when we do things, and that helps us how to go forward with, necessarily complicated environments. So an important part of brainstorming. And then I said, did you have a blueprint for a CCNA network design? And what it came back with, well, certainly, sir. And it talks about, routers, using routers, and then using switches, and then end devices, and then a topology layout that will show me things like OSPF and EIGRP, which are routing protocols, which are obviously part of the CCNA environment, and routing between VLANs. And, it's starting to dive into more details. It's giving me some lab scenarios to test on, security features, troubleshooting. And, that's as far as we got. But I could ask it more questions about, those, for example, those specific scenarios if I wanted it to. So a very structured and I think helpful approach, which starts from a very simple brainstorming question, which can then, lead forward in helping me to achieve, or helping whoever it is to achieve final outcome here. I will just finish now with one very quick, take just a few minutes, and then there'll be a few minutes for questions afterwards. In a couple of weeks' time, I'm doing another webinar using the bird internet daemon. And this was not something that was familiar to me. I therefore went to Chat GPT and I said to it, please, can you provide me some details of how to set up the bird on a Linux server to act as a root server. And, you know, it gave me my typical structural response. It told me to go and install bird, for example, as my first steps, as you would expect it to do. And then it very, very helpfully pointed out to me that when you're running bird, there is a configuration file that's needed. And not only is there a configuration file, but here's the structure, a simple structure to help to get you started when using bird in this environment. And, you know, as a root server, it's going to run the BGP routing protocol. So you have options to put those in. As a root server, it has a router ID, and you're going to be advertising networks. And that's what you're seeing here, where it says define your IP version 4, IP version 6 networks that you want it to advertise. So, you know, full marks, I think, as a structural brainstorming startup. Gave it a very simple question. It's told me how to install it. It's given me the basic structure of how configuration works. And it started to give me a framework for how to build that configuration. So conclusion, it's organized, it's helpful on initial setup. And, you know, everything was going pretty well. I did set up something initially, and I ran into an issue. And it was extremely helpful. And it said that the issue is with this device here, which is a floppy device. And I had, unknown to me in my setup, a floppy which wasn't doing anything. And it threw an issue so that, you know, bird basically wouldn't run. I got this error. Chat GPT told me what it was. I removed the floppy, and then, you know, it started to move forward. I did run into a second issue, and the second issue was to do with what ChatGPT was telling me, which was that I needed in my configuration file a control socket to help me to connect to bird. It wasn't running, okay? Bird was failing to run at this point. So I got an error. I gave it back to ChatGPT, and it said, oh, you need this. The error that I got is actually shown up over here. Unable to connect to the server control socket, connection was refused. And when I gave that to ChatGPT, it told me I needed this. That was not correct. And I actually spent quite a bit of time trying to use this information, and it didn't work. When it didn't work, I finally went back to, you know, the internet and looked around. I couldn't find anywhere on the internet a reference to this in the configuration file. So I decided to take it out. And when I took it out, bird was no longer complaining, and it started. I had some other issues with various different processes that were running. I worked through that. I managed to solve it in the end. ChatGPT did help me, but it also gave me a little bit of a, as I said here, I've just gone past it, sorry, a red herring. What was a, you know, wasted a little bit of time, but it certainly did help. And I gave it a very simple question in terms of brainstorming to get going. So I think, you know, I give it 50%, but not 100%. So I just want to finish, really. This is the last slide. You know, what I tried to do here was to give a fairly broad set of examples around things that we do in networking. And I think, you know, my overall conclusion is that you can't depend on ChatGPT for fully accurate information at the moment. You can use it with some specific examples and get specific responses back. For example, that question I asked it about, using an enable secret with NetMiko. It is a good start me up guide, certainly. And, from a very small start, it can give you a great platform with which to build and go forward on for learning and all sorts of things. It's very structured in its way, but it doesn't replace human skills. So, I think our jobs are still safe for the time being, shall we say. It is not correct sometimes. For example, that control socket in the last example with bird, which was not correct and causing the actual bird to stop running and fail. Is very good at words and document structure. It's very fast to respond and has information on pretty much any subject you can think of. But do not use what it outputs without verifying what it gives you. And again, just to finish, in the words of Sam Altman, who is the now reinstated CEO, it is a mistake, he says, to be relying on it for anything important right now. It is, in his words, not written here, but it is very limited. But it can certainly give you some help and assistance.